Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever you're checking us out. This is Wellness Talk, and of course, I am George Batista, your host and your wellness advocate. Today, I'm going to take a look at the changing landscape in healthcare. What's going on out there right now, specifically with Health and Human Resources. I'm going to dive into what RFK is doing right now. There are so many things, so many changes happening. It's making your head spin, right? This is aside, of course, from the Trump administration and what's going on that side of things. That's a whole another thing. But this is not a political show, obviously. This is a show about health. But I want to highlight what RFK is doing and all the changes that are being made between HHS, between FDA, between CDC, and how it affects us, because it's going to affect us whether we like it or not. So we're going to take a look at it, and I'm going to give you my 2 cents on some of these things. I'm going to hit the highlights. There's a lot more changes that have happened that I'm going to talk about today. I'm sure there's going to be tons of changes coming up within the next a couple of years or so. But right now, there's a lot of big sweeping changes. And of course, there's a lot of blowback from that, from the other side, who literally want to see RFK Jr. get fired from his position. And for whatever reason, they just cannot stand the fact that he's actually trying to make us healthier, because God forbid you make us healthier, right? And of course, that's what this show is about. It's about doing everything we can to make us healthier. But I'm also going to talk about things in terms of what's our responsibility in this, right? What's our responsibility overall? Does our responsibility change because of what's going on right now, or does it remain the same? So I'm going to talk about that as well. So again, a little bit more of news you can use. I'm sure if you guys are in healthcare, you've been keeping up with it. But I'm going to give you my 2 cents in it. I'm going to kind of give you also my predictions on what I think is probably going to be happening moving forward. And and that's what we're going to discuss today. And of course, go to georgebatista.com. Make sure you check out the articles and everything we've got there. We've got tons of articles on there. We've got, you can watch the show there. You can listen to the show there. And of course, like, share, and subscribe. Make sure make sure you get the word out, of course, because this is how we get this show out there. This is how we help millions of people around the world. We've got so many people from around the world that listen to this show on a regular basis, including many who are healthcare practitioners who use this information for their clients and or patients. And, we want to make sure we keep the integrity of that, and also just share it. You share it and share it and share it. That's the bottom line. So, all right, guys, so let's get started on what's going on in healthcare today. And obviously, a lot of big announcements from RFK. Now, let's backtrack a second here. Let's take a look at what's gone on so far this year. Obviously, Trump was elected. RFK was named head of Health and Human Services, which oversees, all the big agencies in healthcare, CDC, FDA, all that type of stuff. And Trump tagged him with literally trying to make America healthy at least within 2 years, which is, to me, an impossible task, but at least it puts us in the right direction. I've discussed this before on this program. So it took a while for things to start getting tracked, I know, because in the beginning, RFK Jr., who's an environmental attorney who has been fighting these types of fights for the last 20 or 30 years, he has sued HHS, which is the agency that he now runs, which is very interesting. But he has also, sued all different types of pharmaceutical companies, and he has gone to bat for the health industry and being healthy, and the food industry, and as far as what they're doing, and trying to take the stuff that's not needed out of the food industry, and even the supplement industry and all that stuff. He fights for pretty much all of that stuff, and especially transparency. And that's the big piece, right? The transparency is the big piece. And this is what we have not had. I mean, in my lifetime, I have never seen someone come in and do what he's doing. Now, there have been people that said, yeah, we're going to try to do some healthy things. And you've seen first ladies making gardens in the White House, and you've seen them trying to, do things with food at lunches in school and stuff like that, which is all great. And you want to do that. But these are small, really tiny steps that don't make a lot of a difference, because what happens, we get caught up in the corruption. Right, the food industries and the pharmaceutical industries and all these industries come and they lobby against you, and then everything goes out the window. Well, now you have someone who doesn't care. Now you have someone who's coming in and actually saying, no, I want to make everybody healthy. I want to make America healthy. I want to change what's in the food. I want to change the perception of vaccines, and I want there to be transparency in pharmaceuticals and in vaccines and in pretty much all these types of things. Again, this has not happened in my lifetime. So we're very excited about it. I'm very excited about it. I support it. Now, I'm not going to say that I'm going to agree with every single thing. I know these are steps in move to the right direction, but he's got to do what he can do. At the same time, he can't be overtly crazy, for example, and so radical that they always thought that he was going to be, that he's going to get himself kicked out of the job, right? So I understand that he's got to play both sides of it. He's got to kind of play things a little bit down the middle, and it is what it is. He's got to do what he can to keep the integrity of the agencies and what he's doing. So I get that piece of it as well. I know a lot of people are criticizing him because they think things should be done quicker. There should be more radical changes. But at the same time, we have to be thankful for what is happening at this time. Okay? So that's just, first of all, my 2 cents on what's going on. But again, it affects everything, right? It affects all of healthcare. So let's take a look at some of the things that we're seeing right now that have recently happened. So one of the first big things that has happened is there's been a plan now between HHS and the FDA to take the petroleum dyes out of the food. Okay, and this is a big deal. Okay, so and this article, of course, is on the site. So we're seeing this, and part of the reason why, and again, he's made this argument many times, is that when you look at the list of ingredients that we have in the United States versus the list of ingredients that you have in all the other countries, and it's like night and day, right? We've got a whole list of ingredients in our food and the food dyes and stuff like that, where a lot of those food dyes in other countries, especially in Europe, have been either banned or not included. And part of the reason is in Europe, you have to prove that it's safe before it actually gets let into whatever product it is, versus the United States, it's the other way around. You don't have to prove that it's safe. You can put it into the product, and then it goes into a category of generally recognized as safe as long as it's not killing people right up front. And then later on, we find out through studies and through all these types of things that, yeah, maybe this thing is not safe, but it might be safe, but we're not sure. So, of course, we have, again, the grass, which is generally recognized as safe, which he is changing that as well. So, again, we're seeing this now. This is the first big step in making food healthier again. Now, the argument for some of these food companies and some of these companies that make cereals, they say, well, the reason we have the food dyes in there is because it's colorful and kids like the color. And I know some companies in the past have tried to change that. And when they did change that, their sales dropped. So they went back into using it. But the way I look at things, you have got to find a way to go around that. Now, again, I'm not an expert on food dyes or how they make food or how they make these things. But if we can put people on the moon, right? We can put people into space. We can do all kinds of crazy things. You got to tell me that we cannot find a healthy way to make these foods safe and colorful at the same time. It just boggles my mind. There's got to be a way to do it, okay? Now, the problem is you have to have incentives for that as well, right? Because again, now you're going back to the lobbying and the corruption that goes behind that. So there's a lot of things that go into that. But at the end of the day, I think this is a great step in the right direction. So let's hear from Marty Makary, who is the now FDA, the head of the FDA. And he's going to just talk a little bit about what they're doing in terms of food dyes.
Today, the FDA is taking action to remove petroleum-based food dyes from the U.S. food supply and from medications. For the last 50 years, American children have increasingly been living in a toxic soup of synthetic chemicals. The scientific community has conducted a number of studies raising concerns about the correlation between petroleum-based synthetic dyes and several health conditions, such as attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, obesity, diabetes, insulin resistance, cancer, genomic disruption, GI issues, as I've seen in the hospital, and allergic reactions. For example, this Lancet study conducted a randomized, double-blinded, placebo-controlled study on food dyes and concluded that artificial colors in the diet, quote, result in increased hyperactivity.
Now, that to me is a no-brainer, right? If you're going to include something synthetic, these synthetic chemicals in these foods, it's going to affect children, it's going to affect people in a negative way, right? Why? Because the body doesn't recognize these things. These are chemicals. I talk about, taking in things that are foreign substances that the body doesn't recognize. The body has to mount a defense to it. It has to respond appropriately to what it's dealing with. And if it doesn't recognize these things, what's going to happen is going to cause inflammation. It can cause neuroinflammation. It can cause inflammation in different parts of the body. To me, that's logic, right? It's just logic. Now, for some reason, people have a problem with that. But again, it is the way it is. Now, here's the thing, what I've said about, this type of program or these things that are happening. 25 years ago, I knew that this was going on. 25 years ago, I knew that there was these chemicals and harsh additives and dyes in food and stuff like that. That's been going on for decades, right? We've known that. High fructose corn syrup, that was in the late 70s, early 80s. We've known about this, right? I knew about that 20 years ago, and this is what I did. I did not wait for them to one day take the food dyes and all these things out of our food. Because the way I looked at it, I didn't think this was ever going to happen. So I was shocked at the fact that it was even, that it was even proposed. But I didn't wait for that. No, what I did 25 years ago is I started eating better. I changed my lifestyle. I took some supplements. I exercised properly. Okay, got my mind right. And I started to change everything, and I boosted my immune system. That's what I did. I know it's boring. I know it's not sexy, but that's what I did. Why? Because I wasn't waiting for the government to do something. I wasn't waiting for HHS to do something. I wasn't waiting for all that. So what I say to you guys out there is this is a great step, and I think this is a great idea, and I think ultimately this will lead to people being healthier, especially with type 2 diabetes and all those types of things that are running rampant. We're spending trillions of dollars just on that one disease alone. But don't wait for that to happen, because it's not going to happen overnight. This is 6 months, a year, maybe even 2 years. It's all going to be taken out, right? So my 2 cents on this is, regardless of this happening, make sure you're taking your responsibility for your health and what you're doing. That's my first little proposal here. Okay, that's regardless of everything that's going on. Fortify your immune system, eat better, try to stay away from these things. And again, that's what I did. I tried to stay away from these things as much as I can. And we know it's ubiquitous in society. I get that. But as much as I can, we try to stay away from that and eat good, whole grain, whole foods. Good whole foods, good lean proteins, good fruits and vegetables, take some supplements, do some exercise, stress reduction, all those types of things, regardless of what's going on out there. So that's my first tip with that. And again, that's what I did. But this is a great step in that direction. I'm very happy that this is happening. All right, next. So another thing that's been talked about. Now we're gonna pivot towards the vaccine issue, right? And as we know, the controversy around vaccines. We know vaccines are pretty much like a religion at this point. And for those of you who are new to this program, by the way, and my stance on vaccines very, very quickly is that it's your decision. It is not my job, nor am I qualified to tell you whether you should vaccinate or not, whether it's childhood vaccines, whether it's the COVID vaccine, flu vaccine, or whatever the case may be. It is not my job, and I'm not qualified for that. However, I will give you the information on vaccines so you can take that information, you can look at it yourself, and you can determine whether it's good for you to vaccinate, for you and your family, talk to your doctor, period. That's my stance on that, okay? Now, just keeping in mind that as a kid, I was fully vaccinated. My daughter was fully vaccinated. But again, at that time, I didn't know anything or I didn't know much about vaccines. I hadn't really looked into vaccines. And I was thinking that all these vaccines were tested and safe and all this type of stuff. Didn't even go into it. Okay. It just wasn't on my radar at the time. I was busy making sure, not only raising a kid, but I was making sure that I was healthy and my kid was healthy and making sure she was staying away from the food dyes and all that type of stuff. So I say that to say this. Again, you have to make the decision. But for those of you, again, who are new, if you are curious about vaccines, especially the childhood vaccines, and you haven't really, delved into it, check out my podcast on vaccine science and on what it was. I think it's called "What We Know About Vaccine Science," and you can type it into georgebatista.com. And I did a whole episode from beginning to end on vaccine science, on vaccine safety testing. What type of testing did they do? How long it was? And what didn't they do? And I even have some court, not transcripts, but some clips from court where Aaron Siri deposed some of the, big wigs as far as vaccines and what they had to admit. So if you're curious about it, again, it's all laid out there. You don't have to believe anything I say. Go to that episode, What We Know About Vaccine Testing and Safety, and listen to it from beginning to end. And I'll talk about not only my experiences with vaccines and my stance on it, but I also lay out from beginning to end exactly what we've learned about vaccine testing. And I play all the clips. So interesting episode if you want to check that out. However, now we've learned that RFK Jr. is now going to be requiring new vaccines to be tested by randomized placebo-controlled trial. Now, why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because it hasn't been done before, especially when we look at the childhood vaccines. We're not talking about the COVID vaccine. That's a whole different ballgame. We're looking about the childhood vaccines. All the 72 vaccines now that are out there have not been tested by randomized control trials. So first I want to play a clip on what the media is saying about this because it's very, very interesting. And then we'll hear from RFK and what he has said about this. So check out what we're hearing from the media on this.
Well, he's already espoused radical theories. Now he says he's ready to make a radical departure from existing standards. HHS Secretary Bobby Kennedy Jr. now changing the way vaccines are tested. His new proposal would require all new vaccines to undergo placebo testing, a procedure in which some people receive the vaccine and others receive an inert substance before results are compared. Joining me now, medical contributor and epidemiologist John Brownstein. So, John, how could this new testing impact vaccines overall, you think?
Well, Kira, I'm a little bit concerned here because this could significantly slow down the development and approval of critical vaccines. If we require a placebo where an existing vaccine exists, that could put people at risk, right? We want everyone who can get a vaccine to get protected to do so. But in a pandemic, adding a placebo could really cost lives. We updated the COVID vaccine every year, and we did immune comparisons, not placebo, and that allowed us to quickly make these vaccines available, and it would not cost lives. And so it's really essential that we have to balance rigorous science with public health urgency. Otherwise, we put the public at risk. And we know vaccines are the most scrutinized tools of medicine we have, so we really have to lead with science and not fear when it comes to the approval process of these vaccines.
Isn't placebo testing already done, though? I mean, how would this new requirement change the testing that's already in place?
Well, Kira, you're absolutely right. Placebo is the gold standard for brand new vaccines. How on earth could we have gotten those COVID vaccines approved if they didn't meet critical safety and efficacy benchmarks? So that is absolutely the gold standard. What we're talking about now is changing the process for existing vaccines. Think flu shots every year or COVID boosters. This is a time when we need to quickly add and adapt our vaccines to meet the circulating strains. The problem is if we create these placebo-type trials, it could really slow things down. And so the public wouldn't have access to these updated vaccines in time. And also, of course, it puts people at risk. You don't want to give someone a placebo during flu season when they need that critical protection.
So this new vaccine development would also involve methods other than mRNA technology, right? So what impact could that have on the effectiveness of our vaccines?
Well, Kira, I think it's a good idea. We should be looking at a wide range of vaccine technologies. What we're talking about here is a universal vaccine technology, maybe focus on whole virus or protein, and that could offer a broader array of protection against viruses. So that's fantastic. But we have to be clear, mRNA vaccines are incredibly effective and safe, and they're really going to be one of the tools that are going to help us win the battle against infectious diseases. So it's not just about one platform or the other. It's about finding the right tool for the right pathogen and not being a one technology fits all approach. So exciting investments, but we really don't want to lose sight of the vaccines that are working in the population now.
Dr. John Brownstein, good to see you, John.
So that's pretty interesting, right? So now let's take a look at what he said there, because I think I'm wondering if you guys picked up on it. When she asked him, aren't vaccines already tested like that? Aren't there already placebo-controlled trials and stuff like that for testing? And he said, of course, vaccine, it's the gold standard for testing. That's, is it? Is it? Okay. Well, let's take a look, because we know that the newest vaccines, like COVID mRNA vaccines, were tested, and we know that some of the mRNA. Now you can say whether they're good or not good or whatever the case may be, but there was a trial and they were tested. Okay, that's number one. However, what RFK talks about, for the most part, is the childhood schedule. That the childhood schedule, not one vaccine in the childhood schedule was not tested in the randomized placebo-controlled trial, which is supposed to be the gold standard. Okay, he didn't mention that part. He neglected to say that part, right? And there's actually a clip out there of RFK when he was doing a town hall, I think with Elizabeth Vargas, where somebody asked him about that. And he made the statement. He said, not one of the 72 vaccines was ever tested by the placebo-controlled trial. And she says, yes, they were. Yes, they were. First of all, I'd like to know how she knows that, because it's been looked into and he looked into it. And no, they had to admit that that wasn't the case. Well, apparently she's not up on her news because she didn't know that, because she just thought, oh, of course they were. Well, they weren't. And he actually had to correct her and tell the story, okay? And I'll let Bobby Kennedy tell a little bit of that story very quickly, how we all found out and how they had to admit that those vaccines were not tested or placebo-controlled trial tested, those 72 vaccines that the children have gotten.
For many years, I was saying not one of the 72 vaccines mandated for children has ever been safety tested in pre-licensing placebo-controlled trials, not one. Tony Fauci was saying he's lying. In 2016, President Trump appointed me to run a vaccine safety commission, and he ordered Fauci and Collins to meet with me with White House counsel, present. And I said to Fauci at that meeting, you say I'm lying. For 8 years, you've been saying I'm lying about this. Show me the study. And he said, I don't have it here. It's back in Bethesda. And I'll send it to you. I never got it. So I sued him. Me and Aaron Siri, and after stonewalling us for a year, their lawyers met us on the courthouse steps and said, yep, you're right. We never had any study. And they gave it to us in writing. You can go to the CHD website, my website, and you can see that letter from HHS. There's no downstream liability. There's no front-end safety testing. That saves them $250 million. And there's no marketing and advertising costs, because the federal government is ordering them ordering 78 million school kids to take that vaccine every year. What better product could you have? And so there was a gold rush to add all these new vaccines to the schedule that we don't need. Most of these vaccines are unnecessary. Many of them are for diseases that are not even casually contagious. It was a gold rush, because if you get onto that schedule, the recommended schedule, it's $1 billion a year for your company. And in many cases, NIH is bearing the royalties. So we got all of these new vaccines, 72 shots, 16 vaccines, and now even more because we're doing the HPV vaccine. And that year, 1989, we saw an explosion in chronic disease in American children. The neurological diseases suddenly exploded in 1989. ADD, ADHD, sleep disorders, language delays, ASD, autism, Tourette syndrome, tics, narcolepsy. These are all things that I never heard of. Autism went from 1 in 10,000 in my generation, according to the CDC data, to 1 in every 34 kids today.
So that's the backstory. And again, I talk a lot about this in that episode that I was talking about on vaccine safety. So definitely check that out. But at the end of the day, what is this going to do? This is going to restore transparency. They're actually going to open the books now. They're actually going to do an actual trial. And keep in mind, one of their arguments for not doing a placebo-controlled trial was that it would be unethical to have a segment of or a group that you're testing that is not vaccinated. Because like the gentleman said, right, you can't have someone who is unvaccinated in their eyes during a time of whether it's things running around, whether it's cold and flu season or COVID or whatever the case may be. So it was considered unethical to do it. And they've said that. They've said that. But what this is going to do is now going to restore transparency. So it's not going to get rid of vaccines. They're not going to get rid of mRNA technology. They're just not. Okay, that would be monumental, but forget about it. It's just, I don't think it's going to happen. But what they are going to do is going to test it, and they're going to make sure that it's safe, and people are going to know whether it's safe or not. And there's actually going to be informed consent. Okay, and if it's not safe, just like pharmaceuticals and just like pretty much every product that we use, then it shouldn't be rolled out until it is, right? Because every product that you use or every pharmaceutical that you take has been tested thoroughly. Okay, pharmaceuticals do have to go through that extensive testing for years. Just keep that in mind. All those things have to be tested. Why cannot vaccines be tested as well? You're giving this to children. You're giving this to people every year, right? Well, it should be thoroughly tested, more than 4 or 5 days, and with a placebo. Because again, that is the quote unquote gold standard of science. So technically he's following the gold standard of science and making it across the board. Now, what I say about this is, if you are waiting for a safe vaccine, whether it's during flu season or COVID or whatever it is, okay, then you're in trouble, okay? I would not wait for a safe vaccine. Now, again, if you take the flu shot or you take the COVID shot or whatever, that's your business. However, that does not stop you from fortifying your immune system, eating good food, taking your supplements, exercising, losing weight, stress reduction, doing all those things, because all that is going to make it a better and easier flu season and or winter or whatever it is for you. So I would not wait for that to happen. Again, take responsibility. Okay, don't just rely on a flu shot if that's the case, right? Rely on yourself and what you do and keep yourself healthy, you and your family. That's what I do. That's what I've done for the last 25 years, and that's my recommendation on that end. Now, one more piece that I'm going to highlight, and this is, again, I'm very, very happy about this, okay? And this just came down, right? What was it, yesterday or the day before? That now there's going to be no more funding for gain of function research, because it has been pretty much, it's pretty much a consensus that the COVID-19 pandemic started in the Wuhan lab doing gain of function research, right? People didn't know anything about gain of function research. Nope, the average person didn't know what it was until literally 4 or 5 years ago. When, I heard about it here and there. I didn't know too much about it until the pandemic actually started. I'm realizing, holy cow, they're doing experiments on viruses all over the place. Okay. Now, this was stopped by Obama, when Obama was in the White House, but then it was outsourced to China, to the Wuhan lab. We know this already. And pretty much, again, the consensus is that that's where the virus started. Okay. So, to me, in my opinion, and I have a very strong opinion on this, I think this is ridiculous that we actually even do this, that this was allowed to happen. Okay, we know already, and Kennedy has confirmed that there has been other outbreaks in the past because of lab leaks, and it would make sense. I mean, you're experimenting in a lab with viruses, and what are you doing with them? You're taking them and you're making them more virulent. You're mixing and matching them with other viruses and doing things to see what would happen. What could possibly go wrong with that? All you need is one little thing to leak out and forget about it. We're lucky that the COVID rates, right? The rates were pretty low, even though obviously there were many people who died of that. And it's very, very sad that that happened. It didn't have to happen if we weren't doing this risky research in the first place. That's my 2 cents on it. You are playing God. You are playing God with these types of things. And to me, and this is always going to be my stance on it, it is wrong. It is wrong to do this. Any country, I don't care what it is, any country, it is wrong to manipulate viruses to see what happens, because there's no possible way you're going to be 100% safe with that, where things are going to eventually leak out. And we saw that it happened. And what was the catastrophe from that led that, right? So now I'm happy to report that this administration is going to finally end the funding to this. So let's hear from Bobby Kennedy and in the Oval Office, Trump signing an executive order regarding gain-of-function research.
Good to have you all. Bobby, do you have anything to say? We signed some very important documents having to do with health. Do you have anything to say?
Mr. President, gain-of-function, this is an historic day, the end of gain-of-function research funding by the federal government and also controls by private corporations on gain-of-function studies. This was the kind of study that was engaged in by the United States military and intelligence agencies beginning in 1947. By 1969, the CIA said that they had reached nuclear equivalency, that they could kill the entire U.S. population for 29 cents a person. That year, President Nixon went to Fort Detrick and announced a unilateral end to this kind of research, what they called dual-use research, research that was for vaccination and also for military purposes. He then persuaded over 180 countries to sign the Bioweapons Charter in 1973. That basically ended gain-of-function research around the globe until 2002. Or 2001, after the anthrax attacks, we passed the Patriot Act, and the Patriot Act had a provision, a little-known provision in it, that said that although the Bioweapons Charter is still in effect, and the Geneva Convention is still in effect, U.S. federal officials who violate it cannot be prosecuted. And that relaunched a bioweapons arms race, and that was driven by gain-of-function research. In 2014, 3 of those bugs escaped from U.S. labs, and President Obama declared a moratorium on future use, and instead a lot of that research was moved offshore to the Wuhan lab. And it launched bioweapons arms race all around the country, all around the world, so that China's engaged in it, developing all kinds of weapons using AI and CRISPR technologies that are really devastating. Russia is deeply engaged in it, Iran and many other countries. It's a kind of weapon that always has blowback. There's always bad news. And the justification for this kind of weaponry was, and these kind of research, was always that we have to do this to develop vaccines to counter a future pandemic. in all of the history of gain-of-function research, we can't point to a single good thing that's come from it. And today I commend President Trump for his courage and his vision in ending U.S. bioweapons research. And Jay, I'd love you to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, Jay, please.
Sure.
So what he said there is we cannot point to a single good thing that has come from this type of research. Again, most people didn't even know this was going on 5, maybe 10 years ago. So I'm 100% on board on this. I support this. I think, again, this is dangerous. Again, when you're playing God with nature and you're trying to manipulate things, you see this happening in all different industries now, trying to manipulate this. And the number one thing that you see a lot of these people talking about, especially these globalists and these millionaires and these types of people, the Bill Gates of the world and all, they are obsessed with viral eradication. They, for whatever reason, feel that we should not have any viruses or any kind of bugs on this planet. And I disagree. And if you're new to this show, check out my show where I talked about why we need viruses. Why are viruses important? I did another program on that. Again, you could search it on the website. But the point is, there is a reason for viruses and bacteria and all these things that we live with, this ecosystem that we live with on this planet. Right? There's reasons for that. If you say we were created by God, well, so was everything. So was everything. So we were designed to live here with viruses, with bacteria, with funguses, and all these types of things. We were designed for that. Nature gave us the ability to live with all these things, and we live with it. We live with it and we coexist, and man has coexisted with all these viruses and bacteria and funguses and these types of things for thousands of years. We wouldn't be here if we weren't able to coexist. This is why we have, everybody, an immune system. An immune system that is able to adapt, that is able to take care of whatever it is and take care of us and take care of our ecosystem. Remember, we have a gut ecosystem. We have our immune system, which is primarily in there, and its job is to keep us healthy and safe, to fight the bacteria, to get rid of it, to fight the viruses, to fight everything, to mount a defense and get rid of it. Sometimes it needs help, and this is where you come in to help it with the nutrients that you need, taking responsibility and helping that along and giving it the raw materials to fight whatever it needs. Do not rely on something that the government did or says it's going to do to fight off whatever. You do what you need to do between you and your doctor and your family, okay? That's what you do, right? Now, again, we all need help. In the old days, I needed a lot of help. I needed a lot of antibiotic help. You know, in that case, thank God for antibiotics because it got rid of my bacterial infections, my bacterial bronchitis and stuff like that. Now it screwed up my gut, but at the end of the day, I was close to pneumonia twice, and antibiotics helped me get out of that situation. But again, I was not as informed as I am now. So again, what this show does is it gives you the information. It tries to inform you, and this is exactly what I'm trying to do, trying to inform you, give you the information, and then what you do with it is up to you. But I hope you make smart choices because that's what you need to do. So I want to thank you so much for joining me this week. This was kind of a guideline policy review of HHS and Bobby Kennedy. I know that in the future there's going to be some more of these things, but I think my ultimate prediction is going to be that you're going to see much more transparency in everything in terms of health. I think people are going to start to trust the health and the medical system again because of that. There's going to be more informed consent. And because right now the trust in the medical system is in the toilet. It just is. And that was because of COVID. So I think he's going to restore not only transparency, but he's going to restore trust in the medical system by the average person. And then at least we can make our informed decisions to say if this is good for myself or my family. Should I work with my doctor, whatever the case may be. Okay? But it's all good news in my opinion. So I'm going to keep on track with this, and I'm going to keep updated. I'm going to keep you guys updated as well. And hopefully we make America healthy again. Thank you for joining me this week. Make sure you take care of yourselves. Make sure you take care of each other. And as always, control your health. Have a great week.